Tobias Harris, and Tobias drills it! Sixers up one!
Embiid fakes, Embiid down the lane!
The countdown to the NBA draft continues, and we're beginning to hear some more buzz for who's rising, who's falling, and where players are expected to go. One of the surprising names that seems to be dropping as far as his draft stock is Ron Holland from the G League Ignite. In this video, I'm going to break down what he brings to an NBA team, take a look at his stats for his season with the Ignite, and take a peek at some highlights to get an impact of what he makes on the floor. And to start with, I would be shocked if this guy slides as much as reports are saying. There's some people saying right now that he's no longer a lock to go in the lottery. This was a player who was labeled as the potential #1 pick entering the season. And while he did not live up to his full expectations, I still can absolutely see a version of Ron Holland that is impactful from day one in the NBA. And if he does fall as far as those reports are indicating, he will immediately be looked at as a guy as how did we let him get that far in the draft? So let's start things off and take a look at his stats, what he brought to the table this year, once again, with the G League Ignite. He enters this year's draft as one of the youngest players, still just 18 years old. In the games that he played with the Ignite this season, overall averaging 20.6 points per game. And I will note that that is more than Scoot Henderson or Jalen Green, who are the top picks in the last 2 years draft for the G League Ignite there. So 20.6 points per game, shot just 44.3% from the field. The efficiency is probably the largest concern in his game, and I will dive deeper into that in a second. Shot just 24% from three. Again, not a number that you want to see there, but rebounded the ball well at 6.6 rebounds per game. 3.2 assists, 2.5 steals, which is very noteworthy to me. In general, I don't tend to correlate steals and great defense as a whole. I know Reed Shepherd is a guy that I use as an example as a player that I think gambles too much and is willing to go for the steal over playing good defense. That is not the vibe that I get with Ron Holland, that he is a guy that is a pugnacious defender. He wants to dig in. He wants to slide his feet, stick to a guy, not let his man beat him. And those hands are legit. That those 2.5 assists are telling of how impactful he is on the defensive side of the ball. And I do think that will be his day one role as the NBA, is he's going to be kind of a defensive enforcer, a guy who makes his presence felt on that side of the floor. So there's a little bit of a look at his stats, what he produced in his 14 games with the G League Ignite during the regular season this year. Let's take a look at a bit of his highlights, and I'm going to talk specifically through some of the areas I think he shines, some areas where I think he has some more work to do, and overall where he projects at the NBA level. So there he is right away in these highlight reel, using that defense, as I mentioned, picking the pocket and going the other direction. That is probably the area of the game where he's most advanced, not just the defense, but the way that he's able to convert it into points. That playing in transition is probably his best offensive weapon to this point. He's got a huge 6'8" frame, very well-rounded, good athletic body. When he gets out in transition, when he's able to pick up ahead of steam, he's really difficult to stop. And kind of labeling players that like I'm projecting he looks like, I kind of think he's cut from a little bit of the OG Anunoby mold. I also see some RJ Barrett in his game. Those are both guys that I think rely a little bit more on their athleticism and their frame, their body. But the reality is when you're 6'8", 200 pounds and can move the way that Ron Holland does, that's going to play pretty much regardless of the level. Sure, there's more guys in the NBA that are capable of sticking with that, but he is a player that I think is going to fit. Look at the way that he rises through the air and slams that one down. We're going to run that one back real quick. This is a bit of a level where you can crank it back. And once again, it's him getting out in transition here. You cannot stop that. And I do love that he is a guy that wants to get up there and dunk. We've talked a lot, or I personally have talked a lot about guys tending to lean more towards, tough finishes around the rim. There's my guy, Matas Buzelos, with the steal, the full court pass, and it's Holland again. That is the large majority of where his points came from, was getting out in transition. And that's been looked at a little more negatively than I think he deserves. Again, just look at the athleticism for getting out of the frame there. And look at that. Big time business decision by the defender there, not going up and rising out. But look at the way he just shoots out a cannon. Look at this. So the shot goes up here. He's guarding the man in the 3-point corner. So he's all the way deep in the corner here. He's already leaking out. They get the board. And look at just the pace that he explodes out of there. Bang. That is incredibly difficult to stop. And that's something that I do think translates right away. I know it's not go get a bucket, but that is an area where you can make an impact from day one at the NBA level. If you're a good transition player, you can find a way to create shots for yourself in that area. And there's plenty of teams which that's going to translate with right away. Now, here's a bit of more of a, I guess, diverse or, a more difficult drive attempt that he has here. Look at him kind of scanning the defense, sees a little bit of a hole. This is a tight gap that he tries to fit through and uses that strength to work through the foul, still finish. That's a nice little finish there. It's attacking the basket that's going to create everything. And I probably am speaking more towards the long term for Ron Holland. That I think that's likely always what is the calling card for his game. Another really difficult finish there. Let's take another look at this up and under. Tough, down, up, through 3 defenders. He finishes that one around the rim. That's going to be, as far as the offensive side of the ball, where he's able to distinguish himself the most. That it's all going to be created from driving to the basket. And to be honest, I think that's the right way to do it. That I think that you see this kind of balance with players, that there's always either you use the shot to leverage your drive or you use your drive to leverage the shot. I don't know if I ever see Ron Holland becoming the level of knockdown shooter in which people are fearful of his 3-point shot. But when you have this threat of driving, you're going to be able to create decent looks for yourself. Kind of the opposite example of that is a guy like Steph Curry, where you obviously know his calling card is as a shooter. He's going to always use that shot to create things. You see the way guys want to chase him off the 3-point line. Buddy Hield's another player where I would use that example, where at times he falls into drives because people are so worried about him getting up at 3-point attempt. Ron Holland's going to be a guy where teams are constantly on their heels, on their back foot, trying to prevent him from getting for the rim. And this is just another example of here. Look at him in transition. There's just this level of explosion, this level of pop when he's out there. You cannot stop that. Like, that's a relatively good line and angle by the defender trying to go up for the block there. And Holland's just longer, stronger, and more athletic there. That I do think translates to the NBA level. That's like not LeBron James level stuff, but it's cut from that mold of player where I'm just going to use my physical tools and you cannot stop it. And there's another great, I like this one particularly because he does use the threat of the jumper. So we see the swing pass here, a little DHO to my guy Montas Buzelos here. Look at it. This is good shooting footwork too. We're going to try to freeze this right at the pass point here. So we get the little pop. Look at it. He's set up for a nice catch and shoot 3, a little more. And then he attacks the closeout. Now, you can see in this given situation, he had no intention of truly shooting it, but I still like the footwork, the form, and that speaks to a more complete basketball player. And once again, a guy just putting it in a place where no one else on the floor can reach it. And especially in like today's NBA, for sure, there's going to be the higher level athletes than a lot of the G League guys that he played with. We know the NBA is as elite as they come when it comes to that kind of thing. But these are still like plays where I just don't see guys being able to rise up and block that on a regular basis. There will be a handful, the Derek Jones Jr.'s of the world and the guys who are some of the best shot blockers and athletes that are capable. And here it is on the defensive end. I love this especially because he's making up for his mistake here. So a little bit of a sloppy pass by Ron Holland, which is a point of concern. He obviously had the double, struggled, takes a good line and sends that back. That's an impressive play by Holland. And as far as the decision-making, that's certainly one of the bigger red flags that people have in his game. Notice we're as far as we are in this particular video, we haven't even really seen any of the passing or even jump shots from Holland to this point. It is all about straight line attack using that athleticism. But I do think that's a great baseline to have. I think that's what you want to start with, and you can build off from there. I think people are underselling the value in having that. And again, he's just 18 years old. This is one of the youngest players in the draft. This is a guy who is still at the beginning of his overall growth as a basketball player. I also think for Holland, like, yes, the decision making is not perfect. Yes, the shooting needs to get better. But I think he's having like the results of past players held against him a little bit. What I mean by that is the past products of the G League Ignite League. That the G League Ignite have not panned out the way. And I just want to run this one back. Look at this. Another very advanced finish here by Holland. Denies the screen. Nice little move. Kind of pushes the guy off, and a tough around the world finish there. Really nice play. But for the G League Ignite, that they were created as kind of this feeder program, this new pathway to the NBA that allowed kids to become professionals rather than taking the college route. Unfortunately, the Ignite will be shut down. I've done a couple interviews with the Ignite head coach, Jason Hart is, I believe, his name over there. Very nice guy, and I'm kind of disappointed to see the Ignite be shutting down without as much success as they had hoped. I do believe like the mindset was in the right place for its creation. The execution was not quite there. But when you do look at these stories from there, it has not been the seamless path where these guys spend a year with the Ignite and then are ready to make a day one NBA impact. Look at guys like Jonathan Kuminga, guys like Jalen Green, Guys like Scoot Henderson. These were 3 players that were all very high draft picks and really struggled through the beginning parts of their NBA career. Now, all of them have kind of turned a corner in their own individual ways. Kuminga certainly made a strong impact with the Warriors last year, particularly as the year went on. Jalen Green, the second half of the season, played the best basketball that I've ever seen from him. I think from a decision-making standpoint or having the ball in his hands, he just advanced in a way. And Scoot Henderson, I'm still willing to believe in. He had some issues early on in the season, but I do think got better. I think those past kind of flaws in those players are being held against Ron Holland in a way, and that he's not going to be as ready as some of these other players in this draft. And while that may be true, you're not taking Ron Holland to be a day one impact player. This is a guy that I do believe you should be looking at as kind of a long-term part of your core. And this level of athleticism, the physicality, the size, the frame, these are all things that you cannot teach guys. When you have that baseline for who he is as a basketball player, and look at those tremendous instincts and taking it all the way with another dunk. I love this here. Look at the way he's not even looking at the ball on this pass. He's reading the defender. He's kind of peeking it and jumps the route right away, takes it coast to coast. That exact play is going to translate all the time at the NBA. And I know guys will be smarter decision makers. It's not going to be there for the taking. But I think like what I like in a basketball player, particularly when projecting as the NBA draft, is you have those 1 or 2 things that you know a player can do from day one, and then you can add levels to it. For Ron Holland, I see it crystal clear that that's going to be a guy that competes on the defensive end, uses his frame, his size, his athleticism to give opponents trouble, and then he's able to be an impact player in transition. That, to me, is a guy that can impact from day one. And especially when you think for the future that the jumper needs work, but I don't think it's as bad as people are making out to be. I get 24% is 24%, but it wasn't the greatest sample size. That overall the season at the G League, 3.6 3-point attempts per game, so not a ton. The 75.7% from the free throw line does not concern me. I know he did not shoot very well in the mid-range either, which people have used pretty heavily to critique him. Personally, like, once again, I think Holland's going to be a guy who is constantly going to be relentlessly attacking the basket. That's going to be who we see of him from a shot diet standpoint. I don't think he will be a guy getting to the mid-range a ton. Maybe when we're looking 5+ years in his future and there's a look at the 3-point shot. Again, I don't think there's any real form issues that need to be changed. Maybe a bit of a sped up motion, but you can see that there's at least the hope of a reliable jumper developing here. And let's go back to that 3-point attempt to take another look at it. Nice little kick out, and you can see not a ton of respect from the defenders. Sometimes it's more telling for how good a player is by just how they guard him. Clear they're not really looking to take away from that shot, but Holland, cool, calm, and collected, takes his time, knocks it down. I have no issue with that form there. Obviously, I'd prefer it not be, and this is mostly due to the pass, but it comes a little below his hips. He kind of has a slow load to the top, but the motion itself looks absolutely fine to me. I do think speed it up a little and he will be just fine at the NBA level, but that's a repetition thing. That in general, every single player that gets to the NBA gets better as a shooter when they get there. That the amount of repetitions, how long you're around, or how often you're around basketball, all these shoot around moments, you just get more polished as an overall shooter. I don't think Holland to be any different in that case. So while teams seem to be looking at him as a faller, I just don't quite see it that way. That this is a dude that I think should be in play for the top 10 picks. And I even could talk myself into a little bit higher than it. That I think some of the past fears of the G League Ignite, people not being successful from day one, is falling or is scaring people away from having objective opinions about these guys. I think Booz Ellis and Ron Holland are each guys that should be in play for potential top 5 picks. I think both will be guys that outplay their draft slots, as it does look like they're going to be fallers, more so Holland than Booz Ellis at this point, but each kind of holding similar characteristics. And some of like the concerns, they overlap because of the ecosystem they're playing in. With the G League Ignite, it's not as structured of a system. It's not as, professional or with a college, how you have like your set roles. It's a little bit more of a free-for-all, and I do think that's a large reason why things are shutting down. But for Booz Ellis and Holland, they both have kind of concerns about their decision-making, their shooting overall. These are all things that I think can get better in a better system or in a different situation overall. So I expect that to be the case. I do think the team that takes a chance on Ron Holland is going to be very thankful that they did. I think this is a guy that will have a long-term NBA career and will be able to make a pretty immediate impact. That I think the age 19 and age 20 version of Ron Holland will still be an impactful player that is playing minutes on a contending team. And I think when you flash forward a couple of years in the future, there's a real chance that this guy puts all the tools together. think at the minimum, he ends up a lockdown defender at the NBA level, a guy that can guard opponent's team's best player. Maybe he's cut a little bit more from even like a Justice Winslow, who I know didn't have the strongest NBA career. But think about this as Ron Holland with a couple more inches on him and much more athleticism than a guy like Winslow. I do see like the OG Anunoby archetype is probably the clearest thing that I would cut for Ron Holland. So I'm a believer in his talents. This is a guy who's been respected as one of the top players in this draft for most of his upbringing. I don't think that should be misremembered or overlooked because of 1 year that didn't quite live up to expectations with the Ignite. So if he does fall in the draft, there's going to be a team that is quite happy that he lands with. We will see what that ultimately is the case. Let me know what you guys think of Ron Holland in the comments, what your predictions or the best fit for him could be. Appreciate you guys for tuning in this video. Make sure you're dropping a like, subscribing to Pick Swap Media, and I'll be talking with you next time. Peace.